Hello and welcome. You're watching Eye on Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné. In our top stories today, Kenya President William Ruto vows to provide a full response after 5 people died and the parliament was ransacked during huge protests over tax hikes. Already cracks in a new national unity. South Africa's 2 biggest parties are now fighting about who gets which ministry. And the Molfeu has become all the rage. The colorful veil from Mauritania is making the buzz on social media in a very conservative society. But first, we start in Kenya. President William Ruto vowed to take a tough line against what he called violence and anarchy. He was speaking in a national address hours after part of the parliament building was burned as thousands of protesters against a new finance bill pushed their way in. Clashes spread in the capital and other cities, and at least 5 people were killed, many more wounded. The military has been deployed to support the police.
Today's events mark a critical turning point on how we respond to grave threats to our national security. I assure the nation that the government has mobilized all resources at the nation's disposal to ensure that a situation of this nature will not recur again at whatever cost.
Olivia Bizot joins us now live from Nairobi. Olivia, welcome. What's the latest?
Good evening. Yes, so the announcement that President William Ruto made this evening and that you just had a snippet of is not what Kenyans had been hoping for. During the chaotic and deadly day of demonstrations today, protesters were calling for the contentious finance bill to be scrapped. But in his speech, the president made no mention of that finance bill and instead said that the government would mobilize all of its resources to ensure security. The army was deployed earlier today in Nairobi in an attempt to disperse the protesters. And it was announced this evening that the army will be deployed in all of Kenya's major cities from this evening. In his speech, William Ruto also called the protesters criminals and said that the conversation was hijacked by, and I quote, dangerous people. So that has not been well received by Kenyans on social media at all. In many of my WhatsApp groups, people have been criticizing the president for calling all the doctors and nurses and journalists and other Kenyan citizens who took to the streets today criminals. So another protest will be taking place this Thursday. That was already planned. And we'll have to see what happens when Kenya wakes up tomorrow morning. Will there be even more anger, or will people be more afraid to take to the streets now that the army has been deployed? So it's definitely an evolving story that we'll be following closely over the next few days and weeks.
So, but until now, Olivia, what have been the reactions so far?
So a lot of Kenyans are incredibly angry about the violence that took place, especially the lethal violence that was used during the protests. Scores of people were killed and hundreds of people were injured across the country, not just in Nairobi. The protests last week took place peacefully, and they started off peacefully or relatively peacefully this morning, but then they rapidly escalated. The police started by firing a lot of tear gas and water cannons as well as rubber bullets, but then ended up firing live bullets when the protesters started storming into Parliament. Ambulance sirens could be heard across the whole of Nairobi as health workers were picking up people who were injured on Nairobi streets. And so people have been incredibly critical of the amount of people who've been injured and the amount of people who've died in these protests. A joint statement was published this evening by a group of organizations, including Amnesty International and the Kenya Medical Association, and they reported several incidents of human rights violations, and they urged all state parties to de-escalate the situation and stop the use of lethal force to protect life. That's what they said in their statement. The opposition coalition led by Raila Odinga has also heavily criticized the use of lethal violence and has called for Ruto to resign today. But this isn't the first time that protests in Kenya have turned violent. Last year, similar protests took place after the publication of the 2023 finance bill. And during the 5 months of protests that followed, about 30 people were killed. But the protests this year, and that have been taking place today, are a lot bigger in size than any of the protests that took place last year. So we'll have to see really how this situation evolves.
Yes, Olivia Bizouet, and indeed we'll keep monitoring the situation. And at the heart of people's angers is that controversial tax bill. The government had previously dropped some of the contentious initial proposals, but that was not enough to contain public anger. President William Ruto won the election 2 years ago, promising to improve lives of the poor, but has struggled to balance the budget. Vedika Bal takes a closer look at that new bill.
As protests intensify nationwide, Kenyans are doubling down against the government's planned tax hikes, arguing it will choke their economy and tighten purses for those already struggling with a high cost of living.
We are rejecting it, every clause. We are not asking for any amendment. We are asking for them to reject it.
People are struggling. People don't have places to stay. People don't have meals to eat. Families, fathers can't put food on their table. We need change in this country, and this finance bill is not going to bring that change.
President William Ruto's unpopular fiscal plans come as Kenya enters its new financial year. Initially, his finance bill sought to impose new tariffs of up to 25% on basic commodities, such as bread, sugar and oil, and impose an annual tax on motor vehicles at 2.5% of the car's value. There was also an eco-levy, a charge on manufactured goods including digital technology, menstrual products and nappies, and a 5% hike on using digital payments. Whilst the government walked back on these taxes and amended the eco-levy to only imported products, a 16% tax on specialised hospitals and a rise in import levies remain untouched. Authorities insist the measures are necessary to cut public debt. Via these additional taxes, Ruto aims to raise $2.7 billion to reduce Kenya's budget deficit and state borrowing. The country's public debt stands at 68% of its GDP, which is higher than the World Bank and IMF's recommendation of 55%. And Nairobi is keen to meet its revenue targets to access more funding.
And while violence back home surges, the first plane load of Kenyan police arrived in the Haitian capital, Port-au-Prince, to tackle gang violence in a Caribbean country. The officers are joining a 2,500-strong peacekeeping mission funded primarily by the United States. Lack of recognition, shortage of doctors, especially in rural areas. Medical assistants in Togo are also voicing their anger. They haven't worked in a month. As a result, many maternity wards can no longer handle emergency obstetric surgeries. Emmanuel Soji reports.
The overcrowded maternity ward in Togo's largest public hospital, Sylvanus Olympio, is facing a critical shortage of gynecologists. Some pregnant women here are on the verge of giving birth. Others are anxiously waiting to undergo a cesarean section.
I've been here for 5 days now.
One doctor who asked to remain anonymous tells us that over the last month, tensions have been rising here at the teaching hospital. Crucial work here has been held up ever since medical assistants, who say they are frustrated by the lack of recognition or appreciation for their skills, stopped filling in for obstetricians.
Now we have to be a little selective. Sometimes we have 2 or 3 deliveries at the same time. So if they're in the hallway, they might deliver in the hallway.
The move has had a ripple effect across the country's public healthcare centers, exacerbating an already critical situation. This hospital's delivery room has not been renovated in 30 years.
This is why other women who arrive don't have space here. This room used to have an ultrasound machine, but it's been out of order for years as well.
The shortage of doctors is even greater in rural areas, where medical assistants often cover tasks normally assigned to gynecologists. The strike has forced some patients from remote communities to head into cities for care.
In 2023, we performed around 3,000 C-sections. And among the 3,000 C-sections, the gynecologist operated on barely 20 of them.
The Togolese Ministry of Health has not responded to our requests for comment. The country's last competitive entrance exam in healthcare dates back to June 2023, but results are still pending.
Now to South Africa. The MK MPs were sworn in. Ex-President Jacob Zuma's party got 58 seats at the new parliament, turning into the third political force in the country. The ANC, formerly the majority party, only gained 40% of the vote in the recent national elections. It entered into a government of national unity with the opposition, the Democratic Alliance. But the agreement already seems to be on the brink of falling apart between the two biggest parties, now tussling over the fine print. Who gets which ministry could be the breaking point. From Cape Town, Anne Wenzel has the details.
The DA, now part of the ANC Government of National Unity, is pushing for more ministerial posts than the ANC is currently offering. They are saying that they want a certain number of ministerial positions and they want to pick which ministerial posts they get. The numbers thrown around are 8, 10 and 12, depending on who you listen to. The former opposition party is also apparently arguing over the position of deputy president of the country. The ANC on Monday released a soundbite from their national spokesperson calling on media to stop speculating about who is getting which posts. But the DA federal chair, Helen Zille, has rejected President Cyril Ramaphosa's offer of 6 ministerial posts and 7 deputy ministers. Letters between the two parties have been leaked to the media, to which the ANC responded that, quote, negotiation by leaking demands to the media is an act of bad faith, unquote. The ANC is also facing pressure within its own ranks over its joining forces with the DA. After the initial announcement of the DA entering the Government of National Unity, many members of the ANC resigned. And currently it would seem the marriage of convenience of the ANC and the DA is headed for rocky waters.
In Mauritania, a dress style known as the mulfeu has become all the rage in recent years, even spreading to other countries in the region too. Colorful fabrics are wrapped around the head and body in a very particular way. Many women have taken to social media to show off their look, which is being seen as an act of emancipation in a deeply conservative society. Ilimendao Sambratpis.
Aziza, a Mauritanian businesswoman and influencer, is making a tutorial on how to wear the mulfeu, an increasingly popular kind of veil in the country.
We make 2 knots, one on the left and the other on the right. You pass this by the head and the other one by the arm.
She has tens of thousands of followers on TikTok and Snapchat and sells items of clothing at her boutique in Nouakchott.
The Mauritanian veil is a veil I wear almost every day. I grew up with this veil. I wish to see Mauritanian designers use Mauritanian fabrics to promote this beautiful culture, the art that we have here in Mauritania.
This lady regularly visits the city centre market to procure the latest colourful fabrics needed to make a beautiful mulfeu. The veils are hand-woven by artisan women that Aziza loves to collaborate with.
Selling veils is my main business. It allows me to meet my needs and the needs of my family. Business is booming at the moment. We have lots of clients.
They are very innovative. Each time they propose to me new designs from the market. These are truly very courageous and inspirational women. I love working with the women who are here in Nouakchott.
In recent years, the mulfeu look has spread beyond the confines of Mauritania to the likes of Senegal, Guinea and Mali.
Thank you for watching Eye on Africa. More news to come on France 24.